Everybody hear you okay back there? Good to go? Okay. Jan, thank you very much. What I'd like to do first is just begin by thanking you all for having me here this evening. Jan's absolutely right. I hate to admit that I'm new to this, but I'm new to you. This has been a topic that's been very near and dear to my heart and those of some of my colleagues for quite some time. But truth be told, there's some folks here that probably need more recognition, certainly more than me, but probably more than just about anybody else in this endeavor. And special thanks to Jan and Chase. Thank you very much. As Jan had said, you know, I had the protection of an entire apparatus, a national security organization, at my disposal. And I was able to operate in a way where I had a significant budget for most of the time. I had a staff, I had resources, I had things that I could use that were at my disposal to get a better understanding of this, and I could also operate in a good degree of anonymity, which means I didn't have to worry about a lot of the things that you all did. And so here's Jan and Chase and everybody else in this room doing their job day in and day out and committed to something where sometimes people may have associated you as being fringe or being out there, and all along, you were right. So I'd like to commend you on that, but one other person in this audience too, people are commending me for coming out. And they're saying, oh, the first time the U.S. government's coming out, they've actually acknowledged the program, and here you are speaking for the first time about the phenomena. But let's not forget, I was not the first person to come out and talk on behalf of a very controversial subject on behalf of their country. There was one other person in this audience that did it before me. And I suspect that individual went through some of the same trials and tribulations, if not maybe even more so. And that's Mr. Nick Pope over here. So the reason why I say that, the ward is truly, truly lovely, but I have to admit there's probably other people in this audience, the majority of people in this audience that probably deserve it a little bit more than me. But I humbly appreciate the gesture. It is certainly appreciated, and I will cherish it. But Mr. Nick Pope decided to come out at a time when this topic not only was a controversial, but we were really struggling with a lot of things worldwide. And so I will be spending a little bit of time with him later on, because I certainly would like to share some of his thoughts and ideas and perspectives and observations. I think between maybe what his organization did and what our organization did, we may be able to better, if you will, as a collective whole, push this finally to the finish line. And by the way, hopefully after tonight's presentation, we'll get around to some questions here. I promise I will try not to yammer on too long, but hopefully you will have the same understanding that I do, and that is, I think the same time next year we're going to have a fundamentally different conversation. I think disclosure already occurred. I don't think necessarily disclosure is an event. I think it's a process, and I think that process began, and that is entirely in large part by the help of you. You folks had a heck of a lot more to risk than I did, because you had neighbors to talk to that would look at you and kind of say, what are you doing? You had spouses, you had children, you had family, and you know, I think you all risked a hell of a lot yourself. So with that said, I'd like to go ahead and start with a presentation. All right, so here we go. I've been told I can kind of control it myself with a clicker. Up on top, of course. Trained observer. So I think when this first came out, everybody was kind of asking some questions about what this program is. What I'd like to do tonight is just briefly go over a little bit about the program, a little bit of the history, what it is, what it isn't, and then maybe where do we go next? What do we do? So as you see here, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It is indeed aerospace. I know some folks that said aviation, some folks at the Pentagon said aviation. I can assure you here tonight, it is indeed Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. And some of the documentation that has come out, not from me, that was authored by members of Congress, you will see quite clearly back in 2009, it is indeed called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace. Now, why is that important? I don't know, maybe it's not important. But I think it's, what I do think is important that when we're here talking about facts, that's a fact. And so I think it's important that we all talk the same language. So in this particular case, the program actually began from another program. We're going to get into that tonight. This is the contract focus for ATIP. Pretty heavy stuff. No, we weren't looking at balloons. No, we weren't looking at drones. We weren't looking at aircraft. This is real. This is what your $22 million worth of tax money was spent on. And there's a lot of it. So I'll give you a minute to take a look at it. Some of the highlights there, human effects. What does that mean? Signature reduction. I mean, a lot of this stuff you would look and say, yeah, this is definitely DoD-centric. This is something that the Department of Defense, national security apparatus would definitely be interested in. Some of this other stuff, you got to kind of scratch your head and say, well, is that a DoD mission? I would submit to you, yes, absolutely it is. Especially when you're trying to protect airmen and when you're trying to protect sailors and soldiers. My focus, before I go to the next slide, was to focus on Title 10, which means DoD specific. There's a big difference between looking at DoD folks and looking at the rest of the world. So when they ask you, did you talk to civilians? Did you talk to these people? No, we didn't. We focused on military. And by the way, that was a lot. It's not like this happens ones and twosies. There was a significant amount of volume just focusing on that. I'd like to go back to that slide for just a second. Let's look at the very bottom where we say investigate legitimacy of currently observed phenomena. This is briefed to the senior levels of the Department of Defense. We choose our words very carefully. They are deliberate. We write words on purpose because they mean something. So when you're saying investigate the legitimacy of currently, not in the past, currently observed phenomena, that's what we were doing. And again, we'll open this up for questions, and so if anybody has any, I'm sure there'll be some questions on the slides. And of course, at the bottom, are they achievable by current understanding of physics and engineering? And if not, what research, studies is required in order to achieve that? Okay, so what does all those studies really distill down to? And a lot of you have heard about the 5 observables. Well, what you really are looking at, I'm not sure if this has a laser pointer. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm not going to try. So if you look at the top left, you're talking about instantaneous acceleration. You've heard that a lot. But why, from a DoD perspective, would that be something important? Well, as you see here, thrust vectoring, G-force protection, right, for our pilots. Maneuverability, enhanced maneuverability, the ability to take an aircraft from point A to point B and then back to point A again very quickly without having any ill effects on the human inside. The next one is hypersonic velocity. Again, from a DoD perspective, you can imagine why that would be important. So that means I can get my people and equipment very quickly anywhere in the world. Enemy evasion, they can't go as fast as me. And then first strike capability in a strategic type environment. Better to know that if you're going to go to war with an enemy, that you can strike first. Okay, so the other one is low observability. It's kind of falling off the slide there, but you'll have to trust me, it says low observability. A bit of an oxymoron when we say it's an observable, but it was. But from a DoD perspective, why would that be important? I'm going to go back to my slide. Oh, there we go. Reduce cross-section. Okay, so if you lower your observability, you're lowering your cross-section. Survivability, if they can't see you, they can't hit you. And then anonymity. Maybe you don't necessarily want to advertise that you're coming in somewhere or that you're going to do something, right? These new stealth aircraft and the new stealth helicopter that everybody talked about on the Bin Laden raid, whoa, whose is that? Multi-medium travel. Why would that be important? Again, here you see there's some strategic surprise, meaning you now have an object that can operate in air, water, space. Probably gives you some target flexibility. And last but not least, battle space dominance, meaning you can operate in virtually all environments, anytime, anywhere. And then the last one is positive lift. And of course, why would that be important? As we see here, we're looking at flight precision. I do not have to be moving like an aircraft to generate lift under my wings. That would be tremendous benefit. Loiter capability. I can stay on time, on target for longer. And then last but not least, decreased signature. So you can see these focus areas are really DoD-centric. They are part of the core DoD mission, both from a defensive and offensive perspective. This is how those 5 observables that we saw, the commonalities, if you will, how they fit within the DoD mission. Because some people will ask you, why was DoD looking at this? Shouldn't NASA be looking at it? Shouldn't somebody? Well, sure, NASA could look at it, but so should we. Next slide, please. I guess that's me. I'm hearing whispers behind the curtain. That's you. Okay, so the next few slides are a little bit of ATIP history here. I'm not going to read word for word, but what I'm going to do is just kind of paraphrase. There were 3 senators: Senator Reid, Senator Inouye, Senator Stevens, bipartisan, Republican and Democrat. Okay. They all agreed that there was sufficient information to warrant increased study into the phenomenon. They, along with Senator John Glenn, former astronaut, got together and they began to scratch their heads and figure out what is the best way to do it. Well, in Congress, you give money to an organization that's capable of doing something with it. In this case, the money was provided to an organization called the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's kind of like the CIA equivalent for DoD. It went to this small little office, and the initial contract vehicle was called AWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Special Application Program, System Application Program. A lot of folks will say, well, Lou, when you first came out, why didn't you just tell us that? Well, the reason is because I wasn't really part of that. And that's really not my place to discuss a mission and an organization that I was really walking into the tail end. I was brought in to conduct counterintelligence and security for an organization that was in the process of evolving into something else. There was another director running that program. So it would be disingenuous for me to simply say, well, ATIP is really AWSAP. Well, it evolved from AWSAP, but it is not AWSAP. And I think the documentation that's beginning to come out into the public forum, people are beginning to realize that. It wasn't a purpose attempt to try to subdue or to hide or conceal the relationship. I just wasn't really qualified to talk about it. And what I don't want to do is, hopefully you're beginning to learn here, is provide information that I'm not qualified to discuss with you. There's 2 ground rules, as far as I'm concerned, involving this program. I'll answer any question you have, but there's something I can't discuss, which is classified information. Don't ask me, I'm not going to tell you, and if it requires a classified answer, I am not going to violate my oath nor my non-disclosure agreement with the U.S. government. But short of that, I'll answer it. And if I don't have an answer, I'm going to tell you I don't have an answer and I don't know. I'll be completely as forthcoming as I can, because there are things I don't know. In fact, there's a lot more I don't know than I do know. But that's okay. That's why we have to continue to seek to find the answers and collect the data, because ultimately, the data will speak for itself. The truth, she's funny. She always speaks. Sometimes she whispers. So you have to listen real carefully. But if you listen hard enough, you can hear her speak. So that's a little bit of the history on this slide here. In 2008, the program was really only OSAP for a very, very short period of time. Oh, laser pointer, thank you. I might hurt myself with this. Okay, thank you. So as you see here towards the end, in 2008, the program was already beginning to evolve. The original OSAP portfolio was much broader than the ATIP. The decision was made early on that we would go ahead and focus the effort more to the phenomena specific, looking at the observables and the identifiables. What can we look at? What can we collect on? What can we report on? Back to senior DoD leadership, because that's what they're concerned with. And try to remove as much speculation, supposition, and innuendos as possible out of the calculus. So more history. So as you see here, the 2008 through 2009, there's a lot of collection going on, a lot, to the point where we're almost becoming overloaded with the results and the data. It's becoming quite clear to us that there is much more to this portfolio than we envisioned. And I suspect when you look at this 2009 congressional letter sent to DoD leadership, Congress was aware of that too, to the point where we were worried there may be a potential counterintelligence threat. Maybe there were foreign adversaries that were interested in what we were collecting. That's how much we were collecting. You see down here, 2009 specific elements in DoD resist the effort. This is a detail I really haven't talked about much. Everybody handles this information differently. And in the department is no different than out here in the public forum. People have their ideas, they have their preconceived notions, they have their bias, and they have their belief systems. And by no means do I have the right or the qualifications to tell anybody what they should or should not believe in. But there are some people who have a great deal of conviction. Just as you have conviction right now in the UAP, UFO phenomena, they have equal conviction from a theological perspective in their own. And by the way, that contradicts with what we were trying to do, for better, for worse. And I'm not saying that's good, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a fact that there were elements within the department that rigorously opposed what we were trying to do, not because the results were not real, but because it contradicted their view. That's all I got to say about that. 2013 through 2014. You see where they say some folks have said in the past. And by the way, the Department of Defense is a fantastic organization. True patriots. These are folks that give they sacrifice their families, livelihood, and their life to defend us. So this is not necessarily a hit on the department. But sometimes the department is a big organization. Sometimes they don't necessarily have all the data in front of them all the time. And so when they said the program ended in 2012, well, the funding was actually to 2013. And after 2013, there were some other funding vehicles that were done to get it through 2013 and 2014. Okay? Now, I won't go into detail what happened with those fundings. The funding actually came through. It actually wound up getting rerouted to another organization because the language was vague. And so therefore, we were forced to continue the program on minimal funds. Now, people say, well, the funding dries up, so does the organization and the program. That's not true. How many of you have ever served in the military or are serving in the military? Show of hands real quick. Have ever served? Fantastic. So you know, as a good soldier, when you are given a mission, you are given an order to guard your post. You guard your post until you are relieved of that responsibility. Well, that order never came for us. And in the Department of Defense, there's always a paper trail. When you establish an organization, there's a paper trail. When you disestablish an organization, there's a paper trail. You won't find one for this program. So I think that's very important that people understand that the program never really went away. Sure, funding for the 2013 went away, but the program never went away. We were never told you no longer have to guard your post. So 2017, some guy makes a dumb decision to I guess leave the Department of Defense, and has some conversations, and in October 4th, 2017, the rest is history. So let's go into a little bit about what ATIP is. ATIP evolved from OSAP. That is absolutely true. OSAP existed for a short period of time under another director to focus on the UAP-specific capabilities and concentrated on the what and how interrogatives. Not the who, not the when, but what is it and how does it work? That's it. And if we could accomplish that, hopefully smarter people in the department could figure out who's behind the wheel, what are their intentions, where are they from, etc. ATIP was comprised of U.S. government, contractor, and military personnel. That's a fact. Everybody hears about Bigelow Aerospace. That is a true statement. We worked with academics. We worked with the services. We worked with certain elements in the intelligence community. We worked with anybody and everybody with a military nexus that we could talk to that could provide some information. Cast a wide net. ATIP commissioned large volumes of related research data, academic studies, and collected data even from the field. True statement. Volumes and volumes of information. I cannot go into detail specifically on what some of that is because it remains, some of it, classified. I believe 2 days ago a laundry list of some of our studies had come out, albeit one of them was classified. I can tell you that that is a correct list. That is a true list of academic studies. If you get a chance to review them, I think you'll agree that once again we're not really talking about balloons. Much of ATIP information remains FOIA exempt. FOIA exempt? What do you mean? Everything's FOIAble. No, it's not. Exceptions 1 and 5. Why would you mark information FOIA exempt? Well, for one, so the adversary never gets a chance to see it. People say, well, if ATIP existed, I should be able to FOIA it. Not necessarily. And some of the documents that were recently released as a result, if you take a look at a recent letter that supposedly came from Senator Reid, on the very last page, at the very bottom, you're going to see a really interesting little words, actually. It says FOIA exempt. That's right. We use that sometimes. Now, we don't use it to keep a secret from the American people. In fact, that's illegal. What we do is we use it to keep it out of the hands of foreign adversaries. And it is an effective tool. So keep in mind, a lot of the counter-argument as well, you're keeping this secret from the American people. That is not the case. If we had a mechanism where we could inform every American citizen and ensure it didn't get out into enemy hands, we would do it. The government doesn't try to keep secrets from you. It tries to keep secrets from the enemy. And there's no way to tell 500 million people in one geographic region and not let that get out somewhere else. So that is why a lot of this information you see is FOIA exempt. Now, is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? I don't know. And I don't know. Is it an effective mechanism? Absolutely it is. Okay, so what ATIP isn't. This is just a small sample of things that we have heard over time that people have speculated upon. So let me see if I can just address it head on. ATIP ended in 2012. Well, I think it's pretty clear that didn't happen. ATIP found nothing of significance. Not true. In fact, I think the mere fact that we even have the 5 observables and we can have an honest conversation about the physics shows that we did achieve something. And when I say we, folks, I'm not saying me, not Luis Elizondo. I'm talking about the fantastic human beings that I left behind at the Department of Defense. Those are the true heroes. Those are the folks that still remain back there, anonymous, working day in, day out, making this happen. So ATIP did find a lot of things of significance. ATIP was a political favor. Let's get this straight. By the way, for the record, I'm apolitical. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, don't know, don't care. My job is to serve whoever is in charge at the time. My job is also to serve you, the American people, the taxpayer. You employ me. So therefore, my loyalty is to you. As a result, people will say, well, this was something that Senator Reid did as a favor to one of his constituents, Bob Bigelow. I saw this process work. By the way, Bigelow Aerospace was chosen by none other than DIA. And by the way, a formal contract selection committee. The senator had nothing to do with it. In fact, he could not get involved with it. So I think that's an important distinction, because people, in the absence of information, in that void, we as human beings have a tendency to fill that void with either what we know, what we think, and even sometimes what we don't know. So I want to make sure it's very clear that it was not a political favor. It was a bipartisan effort by both Democrats and Republicans. All of them served their country honorably. All of them had served in the military. Senator Inouye literally gave his right arm for his country. Senator Stevens, what is now coming to light, actually witnessed one of these things when he was a pilot. So I think if we're going to have a conversation about political favors, we at least need to speak truth to power when we have that conversation. ATIP was only academic. Yeah, we produce a lot of academic studies, and we commissioned a hell of a lot of reports. But that's not all. ATIP was involved with actually speaking with individuals, collecting electro-optical data, collecting radar data, talking to the eyewitnesses. And these eyewitnesses are people, keep in mind, that have security clearances. They are trained observers. In some cases, we have spent millions of dollars into their training, whether they're special operations, whether they're pilots, whether they're intelligence officers. They have been paid to be critical thinkers, and they have been trained to look at a silhouette and determine if that's a MiG-25, a MiG-29, it's in the 90-degree roll, and it's at 200 kilometers in front of me, traveling at 200 knots. These are some of the data points that we used when collecting the data and analyzing this information. ATIP leaked the videos. Okay, first of all, let's go into a quick legal definition of quote-unquote leaking. Leaking means you take classified information and you provide it in an unauthorized manner. It goes out to the public. That's a leak. That is not the case. First of all, these videos went through a proper classification review process. The documentation at some point will probably come out. I'm not going to provide it. That's not my job. You want it, get it from the government. They released it. They authorized, let me get this right. They authorized the release of those videos, and they did it in writing. Now, why they did it, you have to bring it up to them. I know the purposes that we wanted for them to come out, and that was to establish an unclassified community of interest that everybody could be part of and look at and say, hey, I saw something like that too. But no one leaked these videos. If that was the case, I would be in an orange jumpsuit right now, and I do not look good in orange, so believe me. Okay, ATIP is a ploy for the administration's new Space Force. I don't even know where to begin with that. No. Now, could it be used to bolster that argument? Sure. Okay. In the end, if it helps us, go ahead, use it. I don't care. I think that's great. You want to say that the UAP studies is now helping us create a space force so we can go ahead and look at this problem seriously? Sign me up. Sure. Again, here we go into the habit of filling in information voids with things that we don't know. I don't know why the administration is creating a space force. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's not such a good idea. I don't know. I think ultimately it's up to voters to decide. You make the decision if it is or not. But I will tell you, Our humble little program, ATIP, helped inform that decision, and they are going to come back and fund this program in a robust manner where we're going to look at it logically. We're going to look at it with the best scientists and intelligence officers and critically really look at this. I mean, alternative analysis, healthy skepticism, but of course alternative analysis. If it's going to help that, let's do it. Sure. So what's happening now? Why are we here? Well, why are we all here? The conversation has finally moved, folks, from the fringe. So congratulations, you succeeded. If you were to ask me 8 months ago that I'd be standing up here and having this conversation and briefing you this, no way. I'd say we're 5 years away from even getting close to this. So how things have moved so quickly. Now I understand people are impatient. I'm impatient. My daughter will tell you, she's right here in the audience, I'm impatient. I don't like to wait. I want my information now. But as I've told people before, there is a difference between giving you information right versus giving you information right now. They're not always necessarily the same. I'd rather give you information right versus right now. So it is important that we do our due diligence. It's important that when we are looking at the data that we analyze it, we quantify it, we qualify it, do all the things necessary. So by the time we present it, it's like a court of law, right? You don't want a chief prosecutor talking to the jury with a half-baked case. That's a dereliction of duty. It is incumbent, it's their professional responsibility to make sure they get it right. And here is the data as best as we know it to be as of now. Can we go back with those slides real quick? I think we may have, okay. So don't look now, people are now having a conversation over the dinner table. Mainstream media has talked about this several times. They're getting it. Takes a little while, but they're having a conversation. And now all these people say, hey, we thought you guys were crazy. Oh, maybe you're right. So we've come a long way. ATIP focus areas remain relevant still to both national security and to humanity. That's why we're here, right? What's it say here? I think to future of humanity. I'd like to talk about that for a minute. National security, well, if you have something that can fly in and out of your airspace undetected, you can't stop it, you don't know how it works. Is that a threat? I don't know. Is it a threat? The fact that we can't answer that, we have to presume there's a possibility it could be a threat. And I would submit to you, you want us to think that way. That is national security. You don't want us assuming that something is not a threat without all the data points. That is not what we pay the Department of Defense to do. Humanity, relevant to humanity. I've said this before. I don't know the impact this has to humanity and what we should do about it. That's a decision you all need to make. My job's simple. Collect the truth, tell the truth. That's it. Not hard. I mean, at least I didn't think it was hard. It's hard. But really, the heavy lifting here is you all, because you're the ones that have to tell national leadership what you want. You're the ones that vote. You're the ones that sit there and call congressmen and senators and say, I want action, right? So I think the effects on humanity is it does have effect, but ultimately that story is still being written, and how that story ends is really dependent on you. TTSA and others are creating the environment for elements within the executive and legislative branch to have the discussion. People have asked, what are you doing? Well, we're doing what we can. Does TTSA have contacts and connections? Probably. But I also understand the need for privacy. I also understand and respect the need to give people an operational safe space to collect information and make an informed decision without necessarily unnecessary political pressure. We have to give people trade space. Time will be necessary to allow leadership proper awareness and assessment. You cannot digest a 7-course meal in 10 minutes, folks. It takes time. Some of you had decades involved in this. So what you know to be a fact, People are just now hearing it for the very first time. As crazy as that may seem, it's true. For some folks, the article that came out in the New York Times is the very first time they've ever actually even considered this topic, let alone our leadership, let alone our lawmakers. So I think you are well on the way of getting what you're seeking. I think we have tremendous momentum like never before. I think the efforts with organizations such as MUFON, now is not the time to throttle back. Now is the time to push the throttle all the way forward. That's what I think. If you are looking for government to give you acknowledgement and just give you full disclosure, I'll tell you right here and now, the government's job is not to satisfy idle curiosity. That's not the function of the government. I know we want it to be, but that's not the case. The purpose of the government is to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, if there's information out there that could be helpful in doing so, they're going to be involved. And if there's information out there that doesn't really relate to that mission but could be helpful to us, well, that's where we get involved. That's how we can help. Let's go back to those. There we go. Organizations like TTSA are developing initiatives like the community of interest, data repositories, and information sharing. Information sharing, don't think of it as just being here. Information sharing is international. It is global. As we have seen before, there's many nations here represented. That is exactly what we need to continue to do, both as a society and as a government. So, in my opinion anyways, I think getting over the finish line, if there's really such a thing as a finish line, there might not be. This might be an enduring effort, and if you're looking for the satisfaction that I can say, I made it, that day may never come. Maybe it does, but that may never come. Maybe the satisfaction of knowing that people can finally have the conversation at the dinner table, that you can turn on CNN or Fox News or BBC or what else, and people are having conversations with reputable experts, and they're funding programs to look into it. Maybe that's success. I mean, we all have our different definition of what success is.